Hello and welcome to the Philosophy Podcast. I'm Chris Muntz and this is episode 69, Higher Standards, Lower Anxiety. This is going to be a short podcast, mostly focused on some nuts and bolts in the classroom related to grading and assessments. And I've done some episodes in the past on the way I approach teaching and assessing music literacy. And I think in a lot of ways, I'm taking, of course, ideas that other people have shown me or I've picked up from other folks, as is typical, of course, in our profession. But in a lot of ways, I've then kind of taken that nugget from someone else and made it my own, which is also, by the way, what you do. That is what we do. In order to become a master teacher, we have to figure out the things that work really well for others. But that's only step one. We can't copy them. Can't directly copy them. We have to make them our own within our own environment. So that will kind of be what we're doing here in this short little episode. The first thing I would mention is that to get a context for what you're hearing, if this is the first time you've heard me talk about this topic, make sure you go back to episode 18, which is ripping off the Band-Aid. It's early on in the show where I kind of outlined kind of the philosophy that I use for teaching music literacy and the bigger picture, I guess you could say. Then there was also an episode called episode 21 called Everyone Gets an A in Choir, and that has again bigger picture implications in how I grade. And then there was also another short episode called Grading on Growth. So to get this, I wish I could give you just like a few bullet points of how to do this in a way that is wildly successful, but it's not simple. There's a lot that goes into it. So in today's episode, I actually strong-armed a couple of my young singers, a couple of freshman girls. That's not actually true. I didn't have to strong-arm them at all. I basically just told them what I wanted to do for this episode, which was to record a couple of fake tests. We do sight singing final exams for every single student at the end of every single semester. So every kid. And I asked a couple of my beginners after essentially a semester of in-person instruction, because we had, the virtual nightmare first semester. So they're beginners, truly beginners. And they're doing their final exam. And I recorded a couple of exams as they would go, so that you can see the actual rubric happening in real life. So stay tuned for that. But before we get there, this episode is going to be largely brought to you by Sight Reading Factory, for the obvious reason that they are the ones who make this process possible. So I use Sight Reading Factory in my classroom every single day. Every kid has a membership, and we do homework through that. We also do our daily work, which I would say is actually more important to the process than the homework is. So this is daily instruction that happens in class so that they are getting that immediate feedback when the note is wrong, because it can't be you saying a wrong note because the note was wrong and that's it. Fix the note. That's almost never going to help you long term. Why did they miss that note? That can only be done with the teacher present, right? So the homework is a good way to get that kind of I guess the repetition of the language of reading music, so that literacy aspect, but it doesn't really do what you need it to do, other than just building, I guess, the frame of reference, you could say. So the important part is what you do in the classroom with the immediate feedback. Every time an error or a problem or a breakdown happens, it's jumping right back in and getting them going again, which is where the learning happens. So all of that happens through Sight Reading Factory. So I strongly encourage Sight Reading Factory memberships for your students. If you already have them, you're going to be renewing them next year. And as always, you can enter Philosophy at checkout, get 10% off your school's entire order, and you can do that every time you renew. So make sure you are sticking with your Sight Reading Factory and keeping it up to date for next school year. Okay, let's get into it here. We assess kids at the end of each semester in sight singing, and it represents 5% of their semester grade. Okay, now in my school district, we have to do a final exam equals 10% of the semester grade. So what we do is half of that final exam is their sight singing progress, and then half of that final exam is something written, whether it be music theory, concept review, whatever it is that we've studied in that semester. They sit down a piece of paper like, old-fashioned test and take a test. And those two things then lump together into that final 10% of their grade. So however that works in your classroom, if you choose to go to try something like this next school year, then that could look a whole bunch of different ways. It doesn't have to be part of a final exam. It doesn't have to be a 5% thing. That's just how it works in my world. So when I start using that language, just understand that I'm not prescribing those percentages and those points and all of that to you. You'd obviously have to figure that out of how that works in your environment. It could even be that you choose to not have this be a part of a final exam. However, what I've discovered over the course of teaching literacy is that by making a few philosophical changes to the way we grade and the way we present the exam to kids, our literacy level in our kids has just skyrocketed over the last few years. And so this is going to come across, it's hard for me to get this across without it sounding like a flex or like I'm bragging or something. But that's just really not the intent. It's really just to point out that this works. Okay. It really, really works. So to give you a frame of reference, if you have played with Sight Reading Factory before, you know that there are difficulty levels, right? Level 1, level 2, all the way up to level 6. If you're going level with multiple parts, so a choir exercise with multiple parts, you can go all the way up to level 8 now. So for a frame of reference, my advanced groups can fly through, as a group, can fly through level 7s and work their way through level 8s with almost no help. Okay, and these are, again, 16, 17, 18-year-olds. On an individual assignment, it only goes up to level 6, where level 6 is the hardest, right? And through this method and this approach, I have basically gotten to the point in our program where if you can't get your way through confidently and competently a level 6 exercise by yourself without help from a teacher, you're not going to make our top choir. And that sounds like just such a huge mountain to climb, probably for some people. But what's interesting about that process is it has been a process. It's taken years to get there, years. I've been tweaking and working through this methodology for 10 years or so. So some background, I tell my students this, they all know the history of sight reading, at least I'm in high school, because I tell them very openly all the mistakes that I feel like I've made in the past trying to get our kids to where they are, and how that one mistake led to the next part of the system, next part of the process. Why do we do it this way and not this way? Like, you might have some friends at other schools that do it this way. Well, I might come up with an answer for them, like, well, we tried it that way and it didn't work, and we moved on with this other way. So it's through a lot of reflection, because I think that's what being a professional educator is at the end of each school year, you look back at what you did wrong in past years. If you're not doing that, then I would suggest that you're not a professional educator, that you might be a paycheck collector. And don't be a paycheck collector. Be a professional educator, where you look back at the things that went well and you look to enhance those things' influences. And you look back at the things that did not go well and you get rid of them. You burn them with fire. You get rid of it. And so that's what I've done. So when I present all of these ideas to you in the next few minutes, I just want everybody to understand that that's what's happening. Okay, so some of this is covered in some of those other episodes, but for context, I'm going to start kind of at the beginning. So the school year starts, ninth graders walk in. They have some frame of reference for certain things, like they've heard what do re mi sounds like before in middle school. They've seen a quarter note before. They know what those things look like. They have that frame of reference. Our middle school teachers do an awesome job of building a scaffold, like the lower level of the scaffold, so that we can start layering some of these things on. But to be clear, our kids don't typically come in ninth grade with the ability to grab a starting pitch, look at a piece of music they've never seen before, and just sing it without teacher help, without teacher demonstrating, without teacher doing X, Y, and Z to beg it out of them, right? So that is not built into them. We start that from scratch. So what we do at the beginning of the school year, of course, is to build a lot of frame of reference for pitch relationships. And we do that through the warm-up, through the vocalization, through, the technique building is a really important aspect. I have an episode called Don't Ask Your Kids to Sing Louder. That also needs to be listened to understand this episode, because it's the way they sing also that we build into that foundation right at the beginning of the year. If it's breathy, if it's unsupported, or whatever term you like to use, if it's not resonant, then the singer will lack the ability to control the pitch. So we start right away getting those habits established. And then within that warm up, and so this could all happen within minutes at the beginning of the class period, we're establishing the way we sing. Okay, we're also establishing the pitch relationships through some type of solfege game, right? Whether it be a goofy scale changing directions lots of times. Sometimes I'll do like a two-hand thing where I'll show them, okay, you guys on this side of the choir, you follow this hand, and on this side of the choir, you follow this hand, and I make them read my hands with solfege hand signs, something solfege related at the very beginning of the school year in every single warm-up. In fact, we keep solfege in all the warm-ups all the way through 12th grade. So what we're doing there, of course, is we're building the frame of reference for when they do start to sight read that day, and it will happen every day, that they've got that fresh, I guess I call it sometimes an answer key built into their head, right? So that happens first. And that I probably only spend 5-6 minutes on that each day for each group of kids. Then Sight Reading Factory comes up on the screen. We do ours on a big projector. Okay. And we start at level 1, sometimes unison, depending on what seems to be the aptitude level of the group. And so we're talking about quarter notes, like 3-note ranges, maybe a 5-note range occasionally will creep in there. And that's it. And we go from the very beginning. They get no demonstration. They get only what do sounds like, what the starting pitch sounds like. And then they start reading. What I try to do right away in this establishing a frame of reference is that I get them in the habit right away of responding to questions rather than instructions. Where was your first wrong note? Make them raise their hand and say it. We sang re instead of do. Measure 2. Okay. So I'm getting them thinking analytically right at the beginning of the school year. So we're trying to get away from the teacher pointing out the mistakes, which for students feels like a redirection, which feels like a criticism, right? So I don't want to build into their brains right at the beginning of the year that a mistake is a bad thing. In fact, I tell them that mistakes are good things because we learn from the mistakes. And we learn from the most from the mistakes when we can articulate our own errors. When we can explain them, we can then defeat them. Sometimes I'll say that if you name the dragon, you can slay it. And so I start right away asking those questions. Okay, so this gets us, a daily routine, and we spend between vocalization and sight reading probably all takes 10 minutes, and then we're into the rehearsing of the literature. And the important thing about the next step in that is that we're rehearsing the literature, we're still using those same techniques. Here's how we sing. Here's how we get our starting pitch, which is only going to be from do. They only ever get the tonic. We don't ever play starting pitches. Even at the beginning of the year, as a ninth grader with no frame of reference, if you can hear do and your part starts on mi, I will ask them to sing do, re, mi. Okay, now sing your starting pitch. Mi. And they're establishing that could then eventually happen in their head, right? We're building a framework that later on, I hand them the piece of music and I no longer have to have them sing do, re, mi. I can just say, sing your starting pitch, and they jump right to the third of the scale because that's all starting to happen in their head. Okay. So very beginning of the school year, we start the school year now at the end of August. So by the end of September, okay, they're already reading those level 1 exercises with no prompting. They've got a routine within that first month where they're not perfectly reading. They still make mistakes, but that's again the point. And you're going to hear me continue to reiterate that point in this episode. So the next thing that happens is about that time. So about early October, after a month of the frame of reference building, we pre-test each kid. And so for both of these systems, these pre-test and the test, this is twice per semester, that this is where the sticking point for some listeners as they hear me explain this comes in where, I've got 150 kids and I'm the one teacher, and how am I supposed to do this? There are lots of ways that I could suggest fixing it, or solving that problem for you. It might involve begging an administrator for a campus supervisor of some kind to literally babysit your kids while they watch a movie. And I know that sounds like teacher sin. Like the cardinal sin number 1 for a teacher is to put a movie on for the kids. I do it unashamedly. Okay. Unabashedly. especially when we're testing the final at the end of the school year. The concerts are done. It takes us sometimes 3 solid days of each kid coming into a practice room with the teacher for about 3 minutes is about what it takes, and they do one of these processes. And I'm going to let some of these processes here play in real form, real time for you, so that you can see them. But we do that in October, and we shut the class down for however many days it takes. A big class can take 3 days for us. A small class, we can bust it out in a class period and a portion of a second class period. We get through everybody, and we have data on them at the beginning of the year on what level of sight reading factory can this individual kid work through and understand all the musical elements that are being thrown at them. Okay. Doesn't mean can they sing it perfectly. It just means that they seem to be able to grasp the concepts, so that by the end of the semester, that would be an appropriate level for that kid to be able to do independently. So really what I'm looking for in that pretest is making it my best educated guess about where that kid could be with more, 4 more months of daily work in class and whatever assignments I'm sending home for them to do, so that by the end of the semester, that's the level I'm going to tell them that their final exam will be. And that the goal will be that they are completely independent. Their goal will never be in our class that they are perfect with their sight reading examination, because that's not realistic. The philosophy behind that is we don't rehearse that way. Even at the professional level, that's just not how rehearsal goes. At the professional level, singers come prepared ahead of time with the music, and who knows how they're learning it, right? There's lots of ways they could do it, but mistakes still happen at every level. And so what's really valuable to me when I'm evaluating kids is I want to evaluate their ability to contribute to a choir rehearsal in a real world scenario. So this idea of, I tell them right at the beginning, the goal isn't perfect. The goal is you are independent. You can fix your own problems, because that translates directly into someone's ability to contribute in a rehearsal. If I make a mistake in a rehearsal, I want singers, or if I have singers that are making mistakes, I don't want to hover over their shoulder until it's fixed. I want them to be able to fix it. I also don't want them punishing themselves for the mistakes, because a choir environment that's negative, a choir environment that is high pressure, yields more mistakes. That's the trick. If we are forcing into their heads that they have to get it right the first time, then what if we taught them every single time they make a mistake? We've taught them that they have failed. And that just doesn't translate. Like, it's a cool Olympics kind of sport to like find who can sight read things perfectly the first time. That's awesome. And I tell the kids that if you can do that, great. You're also super valuable in our choir. You can help us get to the right answer faster because you're at the right answer faster. That's awesome. But that's not what it takes to be a good choir member. And that's really important. Okay, so we're moving on now. So we've got that pretest out of the way. You've done whatever begging of your administration you can do, or if you have an accompanist at your school, then you have a built-in babysitter, and that's even better. Okay, so these are different ways that you can build that into your time. Now, I'd say maybe another way you could approach it, and this would depend on you and your situation. Maybe you've got some kind of a study hall time built into your school day. Kids sign up for a time during, so doing it outside of class, putting signups right before school, right after school, whatever it is to try to lighten the load within the classroom. There's all kinds of creative ways to get around that. But I would say do whatever gymnastics you have to do to make this a possibility, because the individual assessment, all the things you see when I post my choir on social media, sight reading, and I've done that a lot because I want to demonstrate that this does work. I'm not trying to brag, but I'm trying to demonstrate that it does work. Okay. When you see my kids sight read, where I can throw a level 6 or a level 7 in front of them and have them get no help from me, and they just sing it. Okay. If you want to be able to do that, I really believe that we would not be able to do what we do without the individual assessments. The individual assessments are what gives each of them the ownership on their own progress. Okay. So by October, we've got them pre-tested. We are then proceeding as normal throughout the semester. So then we get to the end of the semester. And again, like I said, we shut down the process. Their kids are watching a movie and they're being assessed one at a time. We just go alphabetically, and they come in on the level they knew they were going to have from back in October. And that's where the rubric comes in, where we have a 50-point test where it is There are no points being lost for a student out of that 50 when they make mistakes. Not a single time ever does a mistake count off their grade. The only time their grade is reduced is when the teacher has to step in, give guidance, give reference, do a demonstration, get them back on pitch, whatever it is that they're having trouble with. If they're not fixing and hearing and solving the problem themselves, that's when the grade starts to come down. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and go straight to one of my students, Morgan, who both of these students who will be appearing here with the enthusiastic permission of their parents. Don't worry. Okay. And Morgan is a freshman, and she did, for her final exam, she did a level 2 on Sight Reading Factory. Now, for this demonstration, I asked her to try a level 3 because I wanted to make sure that you guys could see a test that was kind of above where the student currently is in terms of being able to work independently, because I wanted to make sure that you could see some examples of what it looks like for the teacher to step in and help. And this ended up being a perfect demonstration of this. I will also make a reference that with ninth graders, I typically don't do too much redirecting. If the pitch drifts kind of a semitone one direction or the other around the tonic, I don't tend to bother them about that, not in ninth grade, because as long as they kind of pick a tonal center and go, then what I'm recognizing there is I care more about the fluency of the language in this test than I do about, perfection or exactitude. Okay. So I don't care as much about that. I want them thinking fluently in the exercise. And if I'm constantly nitpicking them about intonation, on the slight shifts of the tonic center, which lots of singers do, then we can get to that later. And I also recognize that only happens when singers are not singing with a solid technique. And I know that over the course of a couple of years in choir, they're all going to be there. So you'll hear in both of these freshman exercises that sometimes happens. The pitch kind of goes up and down a little bit. But they settle in and they work on their fluency of the language, which is really important. So go ahead and enjoy this demonstration for Morgan, and then I'll talk about it a little bit after you hear it. Give F, sing do, scale and arpeggio.
Do, re, mi, fa, sol, fa, mi, re, do. Do, ti, la, so, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Do, mi, so, mi, do, fa, la, fa. Do, mi, so, mi, do, so, do.
Very nice. Go ahead and practice for 20 seconds. Okay, sing do.
Do.
1, 2, and 3.
Do, mi, so, mi, re, mi, do, ti, do. Mi, so, la, so, mi, re, do, ti, do.
Okay, anything you want to go back and fix? Or a part that never quite sounded right?
Like all of it? Probably measure 2 and measure 5 and 6.
So measure 2 was where you went off.
Yeah.
And that's what made the rest of it feel weird. You did eventually calm down. Okay, so see if you can sing from the beginning again, and then land correctly on measure 2.
Okay.
Try that.
Do, mi, so, mi, re, mi, do, ti, do. Mi, sorry. Do, mi, so, la,
See, yes, and then once you got there, once you get there with having fixed that note, everything else after that got easier.
Yes.
And the only major rule you broke was the no sorry rule.
Yeah.
No sorries. You
No
just go back and
sorry.
fix it.
Okay.
Okay, cool. You're
Awesome.
done. Great demonstration. See, I actually love that Morgan broke the no sorry rule that I have in class, because that's something we talk about all the time. I don't want you to say you're sorry after you make a mistake. And so I love that she got to show you that instinct that they come into school, and we all know this. We all know this instinct that mistakes are a sign of our own weakness, right? And so what I'm trying to do with this system and with this philosophy of instruction is destigmatize the mistakes. The mistakes are not a sign of your weakness. They are a sign of your humanity. What matters is how you react to the mistakes. Do you stay calm? Do you take a breath? Do you smile? Do you then jump back into your power, which is to fix the mistake? So that was an excellent example. On the rubric, by the way, there are 3 rubric categories: a 2, a 1, and a 0. A 2 means that the student got every single thing correct and did not need help from me at all. I just played the starting pitch and stayed out of the way. Didn't have to talk to them, didn't have to pump them up, didn't have to show them where their mistake was, anything. Okay. And that's a 2. So that's worth 50 out of 50. From 49 points down to 30 points is what we call a 1 on the rubric, which means that they're able to get through the entire exercise and correct everything, but they might have needed my help to jump in. They might have needed some redirection, and obviously that's a point range of 49 to 30, depending on how much they needed help. Okay, so on the final exam, had this been Morgan's final exam on a level 3, I would have given her a 48 out of 50 for my very slight pep talk / redirection. So you can still see that's an A. Okay, it demonstrates that she is mastering, according to her current level of aptitude, the literacy she should be. And with progress like that, you would see, if I tested her 2 years from now, you'd see that she would be, if she stuck with choir, would be reading fluently at a level 6 with very little trouble and very little stress. That's the key. Okay, so this next one, you're going to see Latea. Latea is also a 9th grader, and her final exam for the semester was set at a level 3. And so in a similar way, I asked her to step up to a level 4. Now, a level 4 with Sight Reading Factory is a pretty big jump. And so this was, again, an opportunity for me to kind of force into a situation where I would be demonstrating some of the type of feedback and some of the redirection that I would have to give for kids to be able to get over that hump. So here's Latea's test. Kids see. Sing do. Scale and arpeggio.
Do, re, mi, fa, sol, fa, mi, re, do. Do, ti, la, sol, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Do, mi, so, mi, do, fa, la, fa. Do, mi, so, mi, do, so, do.
Very nice. Go ahead and practice for 20 seconds. Okay, sing do.
Do.
Sing your starting pitch.
Mi.
Try again.
So.
No.
Do.
It is do, but it's not that do.
Oh.
There you are. Okay, good. Here we go. 1, 2, and 3.
Do, so. Do, so, la, la, so. Do, so, la, la, so. Fa, mi, re, re. Mi, re, mi.
Check that low note in that first line. Is it actually re?
Do.
Sing do.
Do.
Start at measure 2 again.
So.
Sing it.
So.
There you go. And sing.
So, fa, mi, do, mi, so, mi, re, mi, fa, so, do, re, do, re, mi.
Sing do, re, mi.
Do, re, mi.
Okay, make it sound like that.
Re, mi, mi.
Okay, good. How many beats do quarter notes get?
1.
1. Go back and sing the very first measure again with the correct rhythm.
Do, so. 2 and 3. Do, so, mi, do, so, la, la.
Yeah, but clap that rhythm. Nope.
Wait,
Those are all eighth notes.
2. Oh, okay. 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2
and 3 and there you go. Okay, good. Sing it.
Do, so, la, la. Do, so, la, la.
Good. What were you doing before? How would you describe your mistake in the first measure?
I was doing 4 eighth notes.
Uh-huh. Yes. Yeah, good. Nice job. You killed it.
Thank you.
You're done. So there you can see, if you're thinking about the rubric I explained after Morgan's test, we have a 2, a 1, or a 0. A 0, by the way, is 29 points down to 0 points, depending on the singer's inability to complete the exercise without teacher help at all. So this is, by the way, this happened to us when we first started the process quite a bit. We had some singers that would fall in that 29 points and below. We've kind of moved past that, though. We almost never have kids in that point range anymore, partly because we're making sure that we are giving them a realistic goal with the level. So examples of a 29 or a 28 score might be that they can sing the exercise, some of it correctly, or a good portion of it correctly, but only if the teacher is kind of singing along. Then that kind of falls into that 0 part of the rubric. So is she a 2? No, because she didn't do everything perfectly correctly without my help. She did eventually get to all the little details that she had trouble with, which puts her in that 1 category. So then I've got to decide on our system and our point allocation, where does she fall between 49 and 30? Okay, meaning she was able to get the concepts and recreate them with her voice without me having to sing along with her, anything like that. It's her work, right? But I had to step in quite a few times. So and again, this is a kind of above her level just to make sure that I could show you these things. So I would have probably given her a grade of 44, 45 out of 50, which puts that as a good example of a test that would look like on a B plus, A minus level work, where you can see that even though there were tons and tons of mistakes, the mistakes themselves don't torpedo a kid's grade, because the message that I'm trying to send is that it's about the working through the mistakes that matters, not this, I guess, fake ideal arbitrary standard of can you get it right the first time, which again, we don't dislike getting it right the first time. That's awesome. But what I'm here to tell you is by approaching it this way, you are going to lower the kids' anxiety when they take the test, so that sight readings does not become this scary thing that they feel like they're playing Guitar Hero for a grade, where once they miss it, they missed it and their grade just went down. We've got to stop doing that. All right. We don't count off points on their grade that they can't get back because of a mistake, because what we are then telling them, what we're teaching them subliminally, is that reading music is a scary, stressful thing. Okay. So what I'm going to suggest to you is that by switching to something like this, fast forward a few years, because it will take a few years. You're not going to see the results of what like my kids can do at the upper levels tomorrow or next school year. I wish I could tell you it was a magic bullet, but it's not. But it'll take a few years, and then what you will see is that kids actually will be getting things right the first time. A lot more, like way more. They will be nailing things the first time because they're not scared of it anymore. Once they're not scared of it anymore, the shackles just fall off the hands. The scales fall from the eyes. The dead rise from the sea, and all the things, right? Things change so much when they are not scared. Now, I'd be lying if I told you that there is 0 anxiety. Some kids just have testing anxiety and they come in, but I can tell you, and there is some freak out moment, but I can tell you versus 8 or 9 years ago when we were counting mistakes, I am comforting way less crying kids during tests than I am now. So give this a shot. And of course, as always, you can reach out to me with questions. I will say that on the Patreon page, that is your best chance to get me and a good response for some of these things, because I apologize, but the show and the response from the show is getting a little bit busy. And I do have that Patreon over there for people who want to kind of help me financially with all the work that I'm doing to help you. And so for as little as $3 a month, you can get into that private little club over there. Right now, we're at about 70 folks, and I'm going to be putting some new goals up soon for the Patreon where I've got some goals. If we can get to like 150 subscribers over there, I'm going to start adding in some budget that I can do to start improving the audio quality of my guests. All right. So you might notice if you listen back through episodes that depending on what gear the guests have or what Wi-Fi the guests have, there's a wide range of crackliness going on in the audio quality. I'd like to be able to invest in some infrastructure there, some programs, some software that can help with that. I'd also like to put in a goal at a higher end at 250 Patreon subscribers. So this is thinking down the road, and this is why I need your help. Is I would like to also build in a budget each year, and just the more the Patreon page grows, the more we can do this, of getting people here to Kansas City to do podcasts in person. That is a long-term pipe dream for the show, and I will not be able to do that without your help. And so these are some of the things that the Patreon already supports: is the website costs, the Facebook advertisement costs, and we can just dream big and make this professional development at a high level that you can count on. And that's how we do that over at Patreon. So at patreon.com/Coralosophy, you can get the private podcast feed, you can get the supplemental materials, you can get quicker and social media free access to me to ask questions about the things that you heard on the episodes. And that's a great resource there for you for as little as $3 a month. Now, if you decide to go in at the $10 a month level, you can be a producer of the show. Right now, our producers are Ulrika Igrain Munoz Alarcon, Chandler Smith, David Kowalczyk, Kyle Peterson, Michael Herron, Ryan Main, Steve and Kathy Kakachik. Anyone who chooses to jump on over there and add their name to that list or any of the lists at Patreon is just hugely appreciated. I hope you get something out of this. And again, be in touch if you have questions in implementing any of this stuff. Good luck.